for joining us. I'm Terri Burnett, Executive Director of the Women's Nonprofit Alliance, and I am talking with an abuse survivor who has started a grassroots ministry of reconciliation for adults who struggle to forgive. Wendy Redroad is an author and the founder of Mission Edify. She lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm really glad you're here with us today, Wendy.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, I know through reading some of your on website and material and articles and things I've read about you is that bohemian is a word you passionately identify with. Can you explain what bohemian means to you and how it fits into the work that you do with abusive survivors?
Sure. Bohemian to me just communicates unconventional. And I always say I'm a traditional girl with my faith, with my Bible and going to church and my worship and things like that. But just sort of the route to get me is it's bohemian. It's a little bit unconventional, free-spirited. I try to address people with a non-theological language, which is pretty easy to do because I am not a theologian. But I am a woman that has been forgiven much and forgiven much. And I've found something that just works for me that's a little bit, it's grassrootsy, and people seem to relate well. And so that's really where that word bohemian comes from.
What makes what you do different? How do you do it differently?
Well, I tell you, one of the first things I do when I'm with a group of women, and I've worked with women that have been in safe houses that are trafficked, domestic violence, drug and alcohol abuse, child sexual abuse survivors, and I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. First thing that I do is I love a giant dry erase board or chalkboard. I'm so grateful for those. I think they come straight from heaven. And I ask, we're going to be talking about forgiveness today. What are some things that you've been taught or told that were frustrating or confusing or maybe even hurtful? And everybody's got something to say. And I write those down on the board. And I do that because sometimes the things that hurt us, people just feel heard. And then to see what someone said to them that was confusing and see it on the board and everyone else can see it, it really kickstarts a grassroots conversation. And it helps me to understand where we need to start with our conversation on forgiveness.
Okay. Wow. And so can you give me an example of what somebody might say to someone that would be hurtful? Maybe they didn't expect that. They didn't mean to do that, but just something that they would say that you would counter and go, well, I might not say it that way.
Yeah. If we were doing a countdown from 10, I'll tell you what the number one thing is right now. And remember, if you don't forgive, Jesus won't forgive you, or the Father won't forgive you. So oftentimes people pull the commandment to forgive out of sacred scripture, but we take it out of context. And so that's the number one thing where it doesn't matter what happened to you. You have to forgive. God commands us to forgive. Your feelings, will catch up later. This is all very confusing to people that are psychologically wounded that have not even begun to process human emotion. And human emotion is rooted in God. We're created in His image. So we're created to have feelings and thoughts about all the experiences that we have. It affects how we see the people around us and ourselves and how we relate to God, how we relate to the world even. And so I will tell you, for me, and this is again back to this bohemian, this unconventional thing, I was trying to find a way to really meet people where they are, which we all say that a lot. Oh, we want to meet people where they are. Oftentimes, meeting someone where they are means just asking enough questions to figure out what they're not saying and meeting them in those places. And that's really one of my missions for Mission Edify.
That's really good. So at what point did you realize that you wanted to help others? Because I know, being a victim yourself, I'm sure there was years of counseling and overcoming. So, when did you go, Was there a point that you decided you were ready?
You know, actually, there actually was. I was in counseling for many, many years, and also an avid I loved my Bible studies. And so I found myself, I was always in a 10-week Bible study. Years ago, that was the thing. I think they're shorter now. But back then, back in the day, I'm showing my age with my gray hair, it was 10-week Bible studies. And I was always in one, or I was in therapy or support group or something. And so I would go to therapy and I was trying to learn and get better. And then I would get in my Bible and I found myself just highlighting tough questions when I would do other people's Bible studies and kind of just go off road in my prayer. And I found myself led to certain scriptures, just led by the Holy Spirit. And God began to answer the things that I thought but didn't say out loud. And that eventually it just sort of occurred to me that this cannot be unique to me, the struggles that I have. And so as I began to heal, I just began to see things a little bit differently. And I'll never forget this. I was serving in the church that I attended at the time, and we had regularly forgiveness classes, was what they were called, where you go. And I remember the pastor said one time, who's taken this class? Who's here for the first time? And who's taken this class before? And all these hands went up. And then it was like a contest. How many times have you taken this class? 5. We have someone that's been here 5 times. And here's where the bohemian in me comes out. I'm thinking to myself, why are you here 5 times? What are you listening for that you've yet to hear, that you need to come back to this class 5 times? So I was always just sort of reading between the lines because I needed what was between the lines. And I was driving home that night and I was having this entire conversation with God because, again, we were back to the choice to forgive. We were back to, there's just some basic elements that come with, I would say, a conventional teaching on forgiveness. We introduced that it's a commandment. There's always the Bible verse to reinforce that, yes, this is a biblical commandment to forgive. Normally, there's a bit of a reminder that forgiveness is toxic, and I was the type, I was like, I'm drowning and you're describing the water. I know like that I can't forgive is toxic, but it was so frustrating to me. And then there was always the rhetorical question that it was a bit shaming. I'll bet unknowingly, I believe, to the instructors or the pastors, if Jesus could forgive you, who are you to withhold forgiveness? Which just sort of perpetuated the shame that I showed up with. So I was having a conversation with God because I'm chatty with God, much the way that I'm talking to you now. And I knew that He had healed me to a measure, and I knew that He was prompting me to forgive some really atrocious experiences, very traumatic. And I had it to forgive. And I remember saying, what I'm hearing tonight, what I mostly hear in church is not how it happened between us, Lord, but because what I experience with you has to reconcile with the Holy Writ, with the Bible. Show me in the Bible what happened between us, all these conversations and my struggle. And so we did. And I've been a content writer ever since, a bohemian content writer ever since.
Of course you have. And show me, Lord. I mean, show me where that is. I love that you asked that. And I know that that has been a big help for a lot of people that are coming to you and that will come to you, because forgiveness is a hard issue. And you are, we all, and we haven't arrived, of course, but you've done so much work on that end. You're ready to share that with others. And I know that others are wanting to receive that. So what are some of those ways that you help others? How do you help them heal and choose forgiveness?
The first thing that I do is I explain to them what we kind of go back a little bit to, like original church teachings, philosophy, 13th century philosophy, where human emotion or feelings is described as the passions. So I always try to make it, because again, these are difficult subjects. So I always try to bring some lighter stories, things that they can relate to so that they can relax back to that earthy, just like you're at home in your living room. I usually will say things like, I'll begin a sentence and let's see if you can finish it. And I'll say something like, it was a crime of, passion. Most of us have heard that. And it's a great way to introduce what the passions mean, and the passions are human emotion, and that they're very much a part of the whole person. And so for us to deny them or condemn them actually hinders healing and forgiveness. Um, if we do want to bring up the actual commandment to forgive, which is a lot of times this part's left out, is that we're commanded to forgive from our hearts, not just with our minds, from our lips. And so with our hearts comes all the feelings and human emotion and everything that makes us whole human beings.
What are some of the ways that you help others to heal and forgive, and some tangible ways that you do that within your nonprofit?
A lot of times, a lot of it just comes through storytelling. And I facilitate small groups in my parish and then also in some outreach communities. Anything that I can do. I have a website. You can click on stories about just what it looked like for me, what I actually went through, healing and forgiving. Stories that illustrate that with every measure of healing comes a measure of forgiveness, and every measure of forgiveness comes a measure of healing. And so that's part of my mission.
Okay. And I know that you've done some work with groups within for other organizations. You partner with those.
Yes.
Tell me about one of those groups and what you're teaching on.
I recently facilitated a 7-week series called How to Forgive What You'll Never Forget. Um, these classes are always fun. You wouldn't think that they would be because people do open up and share a little bit about what hurts them or where they were frustrating. But what makes it interesting is we really just delve into human emotion, and these classes are meant to show people that they can embrace their human emotion, that it comes from God, and that God is more than happy to get right up in the middle of it. And that really that's what transforms our emotion. And so most of the teaching that I do is centered around that. How do we really invite Christ into the center of this and leverage the very emotion that we wish that we didn't have, but leverage it to actually move forward?
Yeah, I love that. And I know that that's a need for so many. Do you do this for other groups, or would you be available to do this for the other groups if somebody
Oh,
contacted you?
yes, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm
that's good.
hoping to do this with leaders because it just seems to be like a missing link. It's not meant to remove any of the other beautiful links of healing and forgiveness. Those are all very valid. Um, I'm like the training wheels. I guess it was like the pre-teaching to a conventional teaching on forgiveness. This is what maybe makes it unconventional.
Mhm. Well, you bring an element that a lot of us don't have, is that you've been there, you've done that, you've been through some things. God has brought you out of it, so you know the right things to say and how you felt during that time. So you bring that life experience, which I'm sorry that you had to go through, but you do bring that into the picture.
Well, thank you. And I
Yeah.
don't have any regrets. I think it's important for people to understand that these are my life experiences, but the relationship that came out of that I have with Christ is priceless.
So let me ask this question. This is one of our final questions. What do you want to tell pastors, counselors, and well-meaning friends about what to say or what not to say to those who have suffered abuse?
I would avoid going straight to the commandments to forgive in the Bible, unless you're willing to unpack the whole story around it. Most of us are familiar with the commandment when Jesus says, if you do not forgive others from your heart, so then my Father in heaven will not forgive you. And while this is a true statement, I think that we could all agree he was not addressing a battered women's shelter that day. And so we really want to stop and think, if this were my daughter, my niece, my friend, and she had just gone through an absolutely horrendous type of abuse, how would I talk to her? Um, Forgiveness will be part of the story. If Christ is in the story, forgiveness is going to be part of the story. So I would suggest that they listen and that they love and that they offer them patience.
Mm. Listen and love and offer patience. Well said, well summed up. Thank you, Wendy. Now, if they wanted to reach out, if somebody wanted to find you, reach out, missionedify.com, correct?
Yes, missionedify.com. There's several articles on there, and there's also a page with articles from other people, just shared thoughts on forgiveness.
So Wendy, thank you for sharing your stories with us and your experience, your life experience, and your hurts and all the things that you're doing now to help others. What a beautiful, beautiful thing that you're doing. And I really love what Mission Edify is about. So as you viewers who are watching this want to contact her, you heard how to reach her through her website, send people her way. Also, keep in touch with us. We're going to share more stories like this interview with world-changing women such as Wendy. We're going to also talk about newscasts and give you some testimonies, some uplifting stories. So stay right here on our YouTube channel, like and subscribe. And if you are someone who has a passion on your heart, but you don't know where to start, we'd love to help you and work with you and put you on the road to fulfill the plans that God has for your life. So thanks for being here. And until next time, have a great week.